Formula One introduced new financial regulations in 2021. For the first time, the teams were all capped in terms of their spending on car development. This was a huge shift for the sport, as the traditional top teams in Formula One would be brought back to a spending level that would be comparable across the board. 2 years on, we've seen a huge improvement from Aston Martin this year, as they've gone from 7th in the championship last season to now challenging for podium finishes at almost every Grand Prix. So is Aston Martin proof that the new financial regulations have worked? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Aston Martin, the newest top team. When Aston Martin started their most recent campaign in Formula One, it was a step change for the team. They were going from being a plucky midfield setup with a moderate budget to joining the top 3 or 4 teams in Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari and Alpine in terms of spending power. Despite never spending much before, the Force India and then Racing Point team were excellent at maximising the resources that they did have to ensure they could compete. The team would often be the best in terms of money spent per point won, and this is a sign that the team had the DNA to maximise their results in a cost-capped era of Formula One. The team's ownership change, which turned it into Racing Point during the 2019 season, was the enabler to their success. The Lawrence Stroll-led consortium transformed the setup, and following this purchase of Aston Martin, they brought a big name in the world of motorsport back onto the F1 grid. The fact that the team name's return coincided with the budget cap was a coincidence, but it perhaps masked the fact that the team very quickly became one of the teams with the largest financial backing. During this time, their sponsors changed. Cognizant and Aramco came on board as title sponsors, and this, along with the backing from Stroll, has upgraded their setup. They've increased significantly in size and are even in the process of building a new factory. It's clear that this is a long-term project for Stroll, and that a lot of this team investment hasn't yet fully paid off for the team. Despite this, Aston Martin have entered 2023 at the top of their game. They've gone from 7th to 2nd so far this season, which is a huge leap forward and perhaps the biggest we've seen in recent times when the regulations have been relatively stable. But there were signs through last season that this potential was on the horizon. Last year, before the season even began, the team had identified that their initial concept design was flawed, and they were already developing a B-spec car which was then introduced at the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. This was a huge commitment given the budget limitations. To design a B-spec car, the team needed to invest a huge amount of their limited budget, and it meant that they would have less to spend on further in-season development from that point onwards. But the team had the confidence to make this big decision before pre-season testing even began. This wasn't unfamiliar for many of the people in the team. The Force India setup designed a B-spec car when they were faced with a difficult start to the season in 2015. This had a big impact on their season, and they managed to progress up the order based on the fact that they created this second car. This was being done when they had one of the smallest budgets on the grid, and their average finishing position went from around 10.4 before the upgrades came at Silverstone, to then an average of 6.6 from Silverstone onwards. This was a huge result, and it took them firmly to the front of the midfield finishing positions. So when it came to 2022, the team had grown significantly, but lots of the team had already done this type of thing before, and the idea of creating a B-spec car is not an alien concept to this team. Following the Spanish Grand Prix last year, Aston Martin were making continuous progress. By the end of the season, Vettel and Stroll were consistently fighting for points when at the beginning of the year, they were only occasionally able to fight for points. This progress took them to 7th in the constructors' standings and could have almost taken them to 6th, and so the progress made was significant and a sign of things to come. The difference is what has happened coming into 2023, as the size of Aston Martin's team and the fact that they are now a top setup has put them in a far better position. The new regulations. The new financial regulations have put the teams on a more level playing field. This, combined with the fact that the Aston Martin team is growing, has ensured that they've made some good progress up the order. But many teams, such as Alpine, have been trying to break into the top group for a long time, so it isn't just as straightforward as throwing money at the problem. Instead, Aston Martin's new CEO, Lawrence Stroll, has made some strategic appointments. New team personnel such as Mike Crack as team principal, Martin Whitmarsh as group CEO, and Dan Fallows as technical director brings a group of people with a wide range of experience across their careers. This selection of team personnel with experience both inside and outside Formula One has given Aston Martin an ability to develop quickly. This leadership has faced a challenging time with a growing team and facilities that will be bursting at the seams, but with the DNA of this team being maximising their performance from a limited budget, they've been able to achieve these strong results. But it's not just from a financial perspective that Aston Martin has benefited. In addition to the financial regulations, the aerodynamic development time restrictions is likely to be a significant factor when it comes to Aston Martin's brilliant progress from 2022 to 2023. In 2021, Aston Martin finished 7th in the constructors' standings. They were in a disappointing position with the car that they had to carry over from 2020, which was essentially a 2019 Mercedes. The development limitations as a result of the pandemic left them in a disappointing position, but it ensured that the Aston Martin team would have a large amount of aerodynamic testing time for the first half of the 2022 season. This advantage gave them more time in the wind tunnel and allowed them to have a better understanding of their development path compared to the other teams ahead of them. And compared to those other teams with similar time, the Aston Martin team had more resources and financial backing, so they had the ability to exploit this regulation advantage that they had. For me, I think this is arguably more important than the financial regulation shifts. Realistically, with the financial investment from Lawrence Stroll, Aston Martin were destined to become a top team in Formula 1, regardless of whether they were cost capped or not. It seems like Stroll would have been willing to pay a huge amount of money to ensure he has the best team personnel and the best facilities. But the aerodynamic regulations have given them a physical advantage over many other teams further up the grid, and this has allowed them to catch up remarkably quickly. In order to achieve this, the team needed a good concept and a good understanding, both things that would have been aided by the fact that they had more CFD and wind tunnel time. So the real accelerator for their progress, in my opinion, is actually the aerodynamic testing time rule changes. The elephant in the room. Despite Aston Martin's real progress from 2022 to 2023, the elephant in the room is the fact that Red Bull have made further progress to take themselves a long way above the other teams on the grid. This achievement has been made despite the fact that they have been faced with an aerodynamic penalty in addition to the already reduced testing time that they have available to them as reigning Constructors' champions. The Red Bull team have such a brilliant car designer in Adrian Newey that the reduced wind tunnel time seems to have not had a huge impact on their development. This is likely due to the fact that Newey has a brilliant understanding of the team's concept and so is less likely to need to take advantage of the potential wind tunnel or CFD experiments. The Red Bull team are a long way ahead of the rest of the field, and it will take another huge leap forward for Aston Martin if they want to catch up to the Red Bulls. It will be intriguing to see if they can maintain this momentum given the aerodynamic testing time allocations will be reset in July. For me, it will then become a test for Aston Martin as they will face the biggest reduction in wind tunnel time from the first half of the year to the second. The impact of F1's radical financial regulations has been a factor in one of the most interesting progress leaps in recent F1 history. I think what the Aston Martin team has achieved proves the concept of these regulations, and they now face the test of maintaining their top team status.